Nora.
Welcome, Comadres and Friends. I'm Dr. Nora de Hoyos Comstock, national and international founder of Las Comadres para las Américas. The leadership team and I are pleased to have you join us for tonight's teleconference as we're beginning our 17th year. It has been our privilege to support Latino authors throughout these 17 years, and we look forward to many more years to come. We would also like to extend a warm welcome to readers following us on our live Twitter chat at Read Latino Lit. Tonight, please help us welcome authors Gina Maria Balibrera, Ruben Reyes Jr, and David Unger. Before we get started, we have a few housekeeping notes. Please keep yourselves on mute. You can keep your videos on if you want. And we suggest you put yourself on speaker mode, but gallery works as well. But just remember that we're not all on gallery. So if you're moving around a lot, you're going to be distracting us. If you have any questions or comments, please put them in the chat and we will try to get to them. Now let's start with our book club's history. Comadre Tess?
Buenas noches, comadres and friends. I'm Tess Tobin, project manager for the Las Comadres and Friends National Latino Book Club. Our first book club gathering was in July 2004 in New York in Comadre Maria Ferrer's apartment. After a brief hiatus, Nora Comstock re-envisioned and relaunched the book club nationwide to promote the work of Latino authors to every book lover, to bring our community to bookstores, and to support our Latino writers. We started our teleconferences in October of 2007. This year, we are celebrating our 17th year and are delighted to be sharing works by Latino authors with all of you. We created the teleconferences and book club to entice everyone to read more Latino authors and to learn about Latino roots and the different perspectives on Latino culture and heritage. Our book club and Zoom teleconferences are open to all, not just Latinos. We are creating a space for everyone to explore the Latino writer's mind and soul as portrayed through the written word. We encourage you to join our local book clubs in your city or time zone. We have clubs in 12 cities that are meeting virtually and some now in person. There is sure to be one that can fit your schedule. If your city doesn't have one, why not help us start one? For more information about our book club, visit our website at latinolit.com. So please invite others to join us. Comadre Karen?
Welcome, comadres and friends, to our December 2024 Zoom teleconference. I'm Karen Gonzalez, Assistant Coordinator for the Las Comadres and Friends Book Club, Denver Comadres Book Club Facilitator, and co-founder of the Colorado Alliance of Latino Mentors and Authors. Thank you for joining us tonight. Our first interview is with Gina Maria Balibrera. Gina earned an MFA in prose from the University of Michigan's Helen Zell Writers Program. She's been awarded grants from Aspen Words, Tin House, and the Rackham Foundation, and the Periplus Collective, as well as a Tyson Award, the Aura Estrada Prize, and the Under the Volcano Sandra Cisneros Fellowship. Interviewing Gina is Comadre Julia Abrantes, a lifelong lover of Latino literature who has dedicated her time to supporting Latino literary initiatives. She previously served as a board member of Empowering Latino Futures and was part of the leadership team of Las Comadres and Friends National Latino Book Club, where she worked as a submissions coordinator and project manager before relocating out of state. Additionally, she was a founding board member of Latinx in Publishing. She currently resides in Delray Beach, Florida. Take it away, Comadre Julia.
Thank you so much, Karen, Comadre Nora, Tess, Maria, and welcome, Gina, to our teleconference tonight.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for that beautiful introduction, and it's an honor to be with you all tonight. A wonderful group.
Awesome. So first of all, thank you for your wonderful book. It's been a while since I've read any historical fiction set in El Salvador. So maybe for our readers who might be like myself, who needed to catch up a little bit on that, can you tell us a little bit, a synopsis of the book and why you said it when you did?
Absolutely. So The book is it sort of begins and you meet the main characters in 1920s El Salvador in the western coffee growing region of the country. And you meet our four narrators who you soon learn are ghosts. And they're ghosts because they have been killed in the 1932 La Matanza massacre that happened in El Salvador. And so this is a story about these women and sort of the aftermath of this massacre. And it traces their stories and the stories of two sisters, Graciela and Consuelo, through the massacre and through its aftermath, as they sort of they escape the country and they survive it, and they take on new roles in other lands in terms of making visual art, and motherhood, and film. Yeah.
Okay. You just mentioned about the two sisters, Graciela and Consuelo. So what I found interesting is that there are two sisters who were raised separately. One was
Yes.
ripped out of her mother's hands at a very young age, raised in the finer part of the town, while the other one was raised on the side of the volcano, with everyone else. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure, absolutely. I think siblings and sisterhood are just a really wonderful lens we can use in fiction. And I wanted to sort of trace their lives together and apart, their own connection, which is, fraught in many different ways. But to also look at the sort of the ways that the kind of different narratives imposed upon them, that the people around them kind of bring to bear on the choices that they get to make in their lives after the massacre. Yeah, and so, both of these girls would really have to sort of arrive at their own authorities and voices later on. In childhood, they're really, taken and used for the purposes of adults that don't have their best interest in mind.
Okay. And when you talk about the two sisters, and what they went through, I guess for the historical fiction, the historical part of it, what was going on in El Salvador during this period of time that made you want to, I guess, create these characters in these different images?
Yeah, so, I think in some ways there have been a lot of different kind of historical explanations for La Matanza in 1932. Some explanations say this was merely kind of like a land grab, a power grab, this kind of rising authoritarianism. It came from outside pressure, or it was about communism. And in many ways, I think that La Matanza happened as sort of this like culminating event in the nation, after, really like decades and centuries of mestizaje, this like kind of state authorized lightening of the skin of the people, subjugation of Black and Indigenous people of the nation, the kind of removal of people from their land, and forced into forced labor, and this like really elaborate casta system, this system of categorizing people by their color, by their lineage, which really came over with the conquistadors. So I think that's something that, that history had been, buried, and really you know, those, I think those losses had not been, I think really properly investigated for a long time afterwards. And so it was, you know, something that, you know, even in my own family, my own family came over from El Salvador in the 1940s, and settled in San Francisco. And there wasn't a lot of discussion of it, which I think is kind of somewhat common for people that
I think that's happened in many cultures, sadly. Sadly, many cultures. So you kind of touched on, I was going to ask, because the book took us to many places, from the sides of the volcano, the cities, to the streets of San Francisco. And I was going to ask, what made you choose the location of San Francisco for the second part of the sisters' stories?
Yeah, it's dear to me. It's the place that I grew up. It's my, you know, my hometown, and it has an amazing, you know, Central American population there, and community. And I think I wanted to explore also, I think just the history of that city. And I think it also has a lot of like mythical potential too. A lot of the, you know, these stories about women beside water. I felt like the resonance with like some of the Popol Vuh stories there, you know, beside the ocean. Yeah.
Okay, very cool. So how were you able, I understand that it took you almost 13 years to complete this novel, uh, which is amazing. And I know many authors who've taken, you know, lengths of time because you go back. What made you go back and re-edit it, or was there some life event that happened, or some research that you found? What was it that made you go back to keep reworking this till you were final with this copy?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, I started it 2011, kind of the beginning of graduate school, and I kept working on it. And all along I was writing things that I could finish. So I was writing short stories. I mean, of course, short stories also take forever and you're never really done, but things that I felt like I could workshop and you know, I guess make more progress on. I felt like I needed to really, I'd never written a novel before. I had to like let the narrative really unfold and figure out what my characters were doing. And so I think so much of my early drafts were just kind of warming up and getting to know who these sisters were and these narrators were. And absolutely, you know, going on different like research trips was certainly fruitful. And I think in terms of life events also, I became a mother in 2016, which offered this entirely new kind of paradigm of experience, and also a pause, right? Also like a necessary, needed kind of pause from the pace that I had been working on the book before. And I think that you know, also having like comadres, having like really wonderful readers and good friends of mine, and other women that I entrusted this work to, and they entrusted their work to me, and having a great writing group, that was motivation for me to kind of continue when I felt my most hopeless. Because it is hard. It takes a long time.
I can only imagine. And I also can't imagine, because it's not just the two voices. There's 6 voices in essence in this book. Not just the 2 sisters, but the 4 who, as we mentioned, you know, are the spirits that come back and talk to them. How did you keep all of this straight? I can't imagine, you know, post-it notes all over the place and you know, ribbons and directing where the story went. How did you do this?
Yeah, a lot of post-it notes. A lot of post-it notes. I had different notebooks for the different characters. You know, I think there was so much that I think didn't make it into the book either. Like there were, you know, other chapters, there were all kinds of other events that happened. And so I kind of had to like let them, each of these characters on spool for longer than they needed to be on stage for me to sort of go back and reshape them. And I think honestly, it was the time too, like just the time I spent with them, trying to understand and get to know them.
Okay. Do you think you would ever do like a mini novella of maybe some of these stories that you took out of this book, but maybe expand on maybe one of the voices or one of the situations that might have happened? Is that something you're thinking of doing down
I
the
like
line?
this idea.
Okay.
Maybe, yeah, possibly. Yeah, there possibly. You know, right now yeah, I do love these 6 women very much and miss them. So yeah, I love that idea.
Awesome. Awesome. And so at the end of this, when readers are done with the book and traveling and going through the journeys, the good, the bad, and the ugly,
Mhm.
what would you like readers to take away from it?
Oh, really great question. I mean, I think I hope, you know, a sense of curiosity about the place. I hope a sense of curiosity about um, the history of the 20th century too, like how, you know, like what our modern cities look like, our communities, how they came to be, you know, a sense of, I think, wonder and awe at like the like kind of magnificence of women. Um, I think maybe even some skepticism, because I think there's a lot of, you know, strong men with powerful grift, you know, on their lips. And so I think a sense of skepticism too. Um, Hopefully, you know, a sense of sort of, like I said, wonder before, but and curiosity, but like I think that kind of desire um, to dig into not only kind of like the histories that we live with, but also sort of the myths, the stories, you know, unpeel some of like kind of the national myths that we take for granted, that we live and breathe every day. And also kind of the um, the wonderful kind of magical stories that also live with us too. Yeah, I think a sense of curiosity.
Awesome. Awesome. And what are you working on now?
I'm it's yet unnamed.
Okay.
It's quite shapeless and yet unnamed, but hopefully another novel.
Okay,
Yeah.
great, great. Well, Gina, I mean, thank you so much again for sharing your story with our readers, for taking the time this evening to share your insights.
Oh, it's my honor. Thank you.
And we look forward to reading more of your works down the line.
Thank you. Thank you so much for reading my book and for having me here tonight. It's such an honor.
Thank you. Comadre Karen?
Gracias, comadres. Our second interview is with Ruben Reyes Jr. Ruben is the son of 2 Salvadoran immigrants and the author of There is a Rio Grande in Heaven. A graduate of the Iowa Writers Workshop and Harvard College, his writing has appeared in the Boston Globe, the Washington Post, Lightspeed Magazine, and other publications. Originally from Southern California, he now lives in Brooklyn. Interviewing Ruben is Comadre Maria Ferrar, the executive director of Las Comadres para las Americas. Take it away, Comadre Maria.
Hi, Ruben. Welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me.
We want to start off by saying congratulations on your debut collection. It's an amazing, collection of 12 stories. And we have to say, we've read a lot of immigrant stories, and usually they sort of fall into a pattern. We either get the coyote stories or we get the stories about, being in America and not fitting in and either at work or at school or in society as a whole. As an immigrant, you don't fit. And but that's not what we're getting here. This is not, like your grandfather's immigrant story. This is totally new. This is ghosts and dinosaurs and cyborgs and sci-fi and fantasy. So why are you using these two, sci-fi and fantasy, to tell your immigrant story?
Yeah, that's such a great question. I mean, and I'm glad you picked up on it because I was definitely thinking about kind of what kind of immigrant stories dominate. That was really much on my mind when I was writing this. Um, I mean, I feel like very lucky to be writing when I am writing because I really have a long and like beautiful tradition of immigrant Latinx stories to go off of. But I think you're right that what has happened in many ways is that we've fallen into certain expectations, sometimes certain stereotypes, and basically I was like, okay, I don't need to write that story because I've seen it, thankfully, right? I've seen it. Um, and so what I wanted to do was to look at immigration, which is an ever-present issue, both politically, but also in my own life. It's a both political and kind of emotional kind of thing that I'm interested in writing fiction about. But I wanted to do it in a way that would feel as fresh as I thought. And for me, that was by bringing in these kind of speculative issues, which still let me talk about immigration and the systems that shape immigrants' lives, but hopefully did it in a way that felt fresh. So yeah, that was kind of the rationale behind the approach.
It's very fresh, very fresh. And
Thank you.
actually, I'm going to start off with a quote. I saw this quote and it just touched me. Okay. So this is for your one of your an alternate history of El Salvador or perhaps the world. So at the end of your fourth one, you say, the world looked for just a moment like it was going to fall apart because all the Salvadorians were sick. Whether or not doctors find a cure, the world will soon lift itself up and return to normalcy. It's not a pandemic, and all the signs say it won't become one soon, which means the globe will keep on spinning with everyone in their rightful place. And I thought that was, that says a lot, and it says a lot about this book as well, because, at the beginning, it's a very short chapter, short story, but, the world is in a pandemic, maybe something that we know about. But, the whole world is in a pandemic and everyone is fine except the Salvadorians, and the world starts to fall apart. But then, of course, people start hiding their fears and they have to make something up to feel comfortable. And so they're all convinced that they're going to find a cure soon and that the El Salvadorians are going to get better. And is that, when you wrote those words, is that what you were saying? How, the El Salvadorians and all the other immigrants are here fighting and everything, and and we sort of, the world notices, and then it sort of like shakes itself up and closes its eyes again.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that story was very much about this kind of weird uh paradox that I think a lot of Salvadorans, Central Americans, but maybe immigrants more broadly kind of experience, which is both like a hyper visibility and also an invisibility, right? So, when Trump needs someone to scapegoat, it's all this talk about immigrants, right? When people want to think about where their food comes from or, who, you know, basically keeps cities running, it's immigrants, right? But then we don't see them. We don't see them in their labor. So that story was a way of really talking specifically about that and about labor. The funny thing is that I actually wrote the very first of the draft of that before the pandemic, like a couple months before, which is so weird to me. I had read I just read other fiction about pandemics, and that's why I was thinking about it. And then it took this like really strange and kind of emotional resonance after the pandemic started, and we started talking about first responders, and we started hearing stories of immigrants who were forced to continue going to work. And so yeah, that's what that story was about. But yeah, I was trying to think of what else I wanted to say about that story. Um, oh, and I love that quote you pulled out because I think it gets to the heart of what the book is about
Mm-hmm.
on one level, which is um, everyone in the rightful place, right? I was thinking a lot about power, basically, and hierarchies. It's something I was really interested in writing about. Uh, and so a lot of the stories are about kind of power struggles or how people deal with changes in where they are in the social hierarchy. That's a big theme. But yeah, I'm really kind of obsessed with this question of how do we write fiction about these kind of power struggles and these power differentials that exist in our society.
Very good. Let's talk about titles and
Yeah,
stuff. Um, there is a Rio Grande in heaven. So what inspired that title?
that comes from the very last thing in the book, which is
Mm-hmm.
honestly one of
The
my
last
favorite
story.
pieces in there. Yeah, one of my favorite stories in there. Um, and it's a line that repeats. There's a Rio Grande in heaven, and that's what that story is kind of about. Um, I came up with that kind of story after reading this poet. His name is Jose Olivares. I don't know if you guys have read him. He has a great collection called his first collection is called Citizen Illegal, and in that collection of poetry, he has this series about Mexicans in heaven, and they're really funny and interesting. But it really made me think about, that concept of whether things that we go through in this life, whether the position we have in this life has any bearing on the next. And I think that was probably the first kind of where I had the first kernel. And then the other thing that story is about is obviously who it's dedicated to, which are these two migrants who drowned in the Rio Grande. And that story is a way of trying to both honor their memory and their lives and to kind of offer them a little bit of kindness and hope in the form of fiction. Um, but yeah, that's and I'm trying to remember. Oh, the story of why it's the book title is basically I was, going back and forth over. This was basically my MFA thesis, pretty much. And so I was with a classmate, and I was like, I don't know. I had a different title, and I was like, I don't know about, it's okay, but like, is there something better? And then I showed her that piece, and she was like, I think that's your title, and I was like, I think you're right. And that's kind of how I landed there.
And then how come there are five alternate histories of El Salvador in the world?
Yeah, I wrote probably a couple more that just didn't make it. They didn't feel like they quite fit. Um, that series I was really interested in because I mean the reason there's five is because they were originally one story, but when I presented them all together, it got a little bit confusing. Um, in that people were wondering whether each one was connected to the other one. There were like all these questions about why the stories were all together. And I realized that actually they were different stories that just had this kind of same conceit. And so I decided to use the same title, even though the stories were different. And I think it creates a nice kind of like propulsion, right? A little like trail for a reader to follow. The first time they read it, they're like, okay, that's the concept. And then by the second time or third time, they're like, okay, I understand what's going on here. And I space them evenly so that, it
Yes,
follows
yes,
you
you
from the
did.
beginning to the
Yeah,
end.
it's like a continuum line. There's a break, and then
Yeah.
there's a break, and then like, yes. Now, I
Yeah.
have to tell you, I have to admit, some of the stories were really fascinating, and some of the stories were really terrifying. But the one that touched me the most was Try Again, the one about the father and stuff,
Hmm.
that the father passes away and the son, there's that new tech where the son takes a piece from his brain and puts it into a little tiny robot, and then the robot after time learns, to emulate the father and has all the same feelings and the same speech and all this. And I thought that was so, let me tell you, I almost cried because that part with the grief, I mean, I have felt that. And it
Yeah.
was like, and it's true. I would like a little teeny robot with my mom and my dad, for that they can never leave me. Um, pero then of course, it's like like I was saying, fascinating and terrifying, because all of a sudden the little tiny robot turns on the sun, you know, and that was very terrifying. So, but so was this story, and I know in a couple of other stories you also mentioned homosexuality. Is this story like a shout out and stuff about self-acceptance, and that sometimes, you know, you have to grow up and you know, and what mommy and daddy say, you know, you take it to heart, but you got to move on. Is that what this is?
Yeah, yeah, in some ways. I mean, I wanted to write, queer characters, bisexual characters, because, it's like the kind of the people that have populated my life, and it felt like if I'm gonna write fiction, even if it's sci-fi, even if it's, you know, even if we go to Mars, it has to be emotionally true, and representing the kind of diversity of sexualities of the people that are in my life felt really important. So that's kind of why that's like a recurring theme. And yeah, and that story is a little bit about, it's really about how you can't change the kind of relationships and the dynamics, which feels a little cynical, I guess, but like I think it's to a degree true. But more specifically, I was thinking about grief and the way grief shapes our perception of those we loved. That actually kind of the idea came to me after my grandfather died, and my grandfather was just like the best. Like I loved him, he loved me. He was like the life of the party, always had a joke. He was like that kind of figure. Um, but at the same time, he had multiple marriages. There was definitely some drama with the family and with certain members, as everyone has, right? That's just what families are. But I was thinking about how, when he passed, it was easy to remember all the good stuff, a little bit harder to touch the thorny stuff. And that's what that story was about. And then separately, I was thinking about this issue of sexuality and parent-child dynamics, and the father in that story is a guerrilla soldier, a former guerrilla soldier. I was thinking about intergenerational trauma. And so I was, had this kind of emotional question from my life, and then all these other things I was interested in writing about, and they just kind of all came together in that story. Um, but yeah, and then the last thing I'll say is that also that story is sad and terrifying for sure. Um, but there's kind of a happy ending in that, like, the son character has someone at the end. I won't give too much away, but there's a character in that story that, if you want to imagine a happy ending, you kind of can. And that was really important,
Mm-hmm.
to show that even amongst the grief and the trauma, there are those people that will hold you, and that see you for who you are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it also shows, you know, yes, he has his happy ending, and but it also shows that he grows up, you know? It's
Yeah.
like, you know, whatever, you know, when your relationships is, you know, with your parents, you know, they're always going to see you as a little kid. To them, you're going to be 6 years old for the rest of your life and
Yeah.
stuff. And you're, you know, a grown ass woman, and your mother's still giving you orders or telling you what to do, you know? And no matter how many times you remind her, she always forgets. But okay, that's another story. Do you have, I know that you said that there is a Rio Grande in Heaven was one of your favorites. Do you have a favorite in this book?
That's such a good question. I don't know. I feel like I have. I think there are some I'm attached to because they felt like breakthroughs as I was writing the book, right? The weird thing about writing a story collection is that it comes together. I mean, this is true of a novel too, but I think in stories it comes together in like these complete parts over a while. I think probably like 8 years in the case of this book. And so I have a strong connection to the ones that felt like, oh, this is it. Like I got something really true and honest, and like I'm getting closer to this being a full book project. And so I'd say probably the Mango Story, He Eats His Own, which was one of the very first ones I finished. Um, and I felt like when I finished that story, I just had the feeling I was like, there's so many things to address and edit, but like the heart is there, which is a very rare but great feeling. The Myth of the Self-Made Man, I wrote right before grad school, and I felt like I hit something there. Try Again. Um, and the Choose Your Own Adventure Story. So those four, I feel like were, the last two in grad school, the first two before. But when I wrote those, I was like, there's something like here. Like I found gold somehow. And so I think
Yes,
those have
you
an extra
did.
special place in my heart. Yeah.
Although I have to tell you, I almost got lost in that adventure one. I kept going forward, then I went back, and then I went forward, and then I went back, and then I got lost. But it was
Yeah.
very good. Pick your own adventure was very good. Very, how did you keep that together? There were so many pieces there.
Oh my gosh, I know. I look back on it, I'm like, I must have gone through some like fugue state. I don't usually outline, but for that one I had to like make a tree of the decisions at least, so I knew how many pieces I had. And it changed a little bit, but that was the most important step. Um, yeah, I think I wrote it in the summer between um my first and second year of grad school when I had a little bit of time to do that, which I think that helped a lot because it's kind of an ambitious and it's the longest story in there too.
It is the longest
Yeah.
story, but very ambitious, and it worked really good.
Thank you.
I was very engaged, lost but engaged. Always a good thing. So, a little birdie told us that you have a novel coming out next year.
I do, yeah.
So, spill
My
it.
first novel. Yeah, it's called Archive of Unknown Universes. It's out in July, and it is basically a novel that follows two families over alternate histories of the Salvadoran Civil War. And it hinges around the life of a guerrilla soldier. So in one of these timelines, he lives, in the other, he dies. Um, and it's a little bit about fate, love, relationships. It's a love story and a breakup story. It's a lot of things. It's obviously about war and the toll of civil war. Yeah, and that'll be out in July. I'm learning how to talk about it because it's the new project, but I'm really, I don't know, I'm thrilled. I publishing a book is so scary. It's so scary, so I'm trying to fight those feelings. But I feel, yeah, I feel grateful that I got to do it with the same team who published this book, which I feel like is like a writer's dream.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah, so that'll be out in July.
Very good. You'll have to keep us posted. We want to hear all about it.
Definitely, definitely.
All right. Well, thank you for being with us. Congratulations on your book, and good luck on the rest of your book tour.
Yes, thank you. Thank you to all the organizers and to everyone who attended and the other authors. Really appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you. Comadre Karen?
Okay, and gracias, compadre y comadre. Our third interview tonight is with David Unger. Born in Guatemala and living in New York since his childhood, David Unger received his country's Miguel Ángel Asturias National Literature Prize for Lifetime Achievement in 2014. He has translated 16 titles himself, and his books are often translated into multiple languages. His picture book, José Feeds the World, was published in 2024 and tells the true story of José Andrés, an award-winning chef, food activist, and founder of World Central Kitchen. Interviewing David is Comadre Dora Maria Abreu. Dora is an amplifier of diverse voices, catalyst, connector, and tribe builder. Take it away, Comadre Dora.
Thank you so much, Comadre Karen. And hello, David. Oh my goodness.
Hi, how are you?
I was excited to meet you because we both have titles that have the word "You Are Beautiful." You have a book in my eyes, "You Are Beautiful." I have a book, kids book, "You Are Beautiful." So I was like, oh man, we were destined to cross paths. One, I'm a foodie, but this book is really a homage to Jose. So I'm like, one, did you cross paths with him? Because
With
this
José
was
Andrés.
very personal. Like even things with his parents, like got the gist of that, the essence of his relationship with his parents was really captured. And I'm like, he has to have known this guy. Like, what did you camp out in his house every day? Like, tell us what inspired you to write this book, and how did you get all these details from Jose's entire life?
Well, Dora Maria, thanks so much for reading the book and thank all the comadres. I go back, I think about 13 or 14 years, Nora, when I participated with you and some other, mostly Latinas at Medgar Evers College, doing workshops trying to get Latinos into getting agents and learning the ropes on how to publish books. So Dora Maria, actually, I didn't camp out with José Andrés. You know, through a friend of mine, Mauricio Velázquez, who runs a press called Duopress. He's Mexican and has been living in this country for about 20 years. He knew that I've written other children's books and 5 novels and translated all these books. And he said, "But have you ever written a book of nonfiction?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Well, would you want to try?" And I said, "Sure, but what's the subject?" And he said, "Well, what about José Andrés Huerta?" And I said, "Of course, I'll do it." And that's because I knew about José Andrés, the place that he played in introducing tapas to eaters in the United States, and the amazing work that he's done with the World Central Kitchen since the year 2010 when he went to Haiti during the earthquake. So Dora Maria, there's this thing called Google. So you can, I Googled José Andrés and read not a huge number of articles, but enough articles, and watched a couple of videos. And then I started to write, and basically what the story told itself in a way, because as you might have noticed, José Andrés's parents were both nurses in Asturias. And when he was a little boy, he would go with his parents to the hospital, and he watched how his parents took care of people, tended to their health. And on weekends, his mother cooked for the family during the week. On weekends, his father would cook, on Sundays, he would cook a large paella in the backyard. And all these people in the small town, all their friends would come over, and they would drink and eat and dance and sing. And José Andrés wanted to be part of this process, so he wanted to cook. And his father said, "No, slow down, José Andrés. First, you have to know how to tend the fire, how to control the fire." And in the beginning, he was slicing carrots and peeling potatoes, and sort of he learned from his father that in order to be a good cook, you have to know the products you're using and working with. I also wanted to say that I feel like very lucky that these 2 Guanacos allowed a Chapin to be on their show. I feel totally outnumbered by Salvadoranians here, but it's okay.
No worries, no worries. Well, let me tell you, what didn't make it into the book? Because you've done some research, you did some things. What got left out of the book?
Okay, so this book had a kind. I have to show the book so people can see what it is. It's José Feeds the World, and I will show the Spanish version that was published in Spain with La Maleta, and it was also published in Mexico this last week with Castillo. But what happened was, when I was writing the book, my editor Mauricio found out that José Andrés had given his approval to another writer to do a book about him for Penguin Random House. And so within a 10-day period, both our books came out. The other book came out with Penguin Random House. Mine came out with Duopress. The other book is called One Plate of Hope, and mine is called José Feeds the World. And I had an interview with the author on PW, because PW thought, Publishers Weekly thought that it was sort of interesting that the 2 writers had written a book. And there are paths that we took differently. One thing that she did that I didn't include that I thought was quite wonderful was that after he worked in this very expensive Catalan restaurant called El Bulli, which costs like $300 to go eat there, he spent a year like on a merchant ship cooking for Spanish sailors. And I totally missed that. And I would have wanted to include it because when he finally came to the United States, when he came to New York and he started cooking in a restaurant, he also started working in a soup kitchen. And I think one of the reasons why he was working in a soup kitchen is not only because his parents were nurses, but also because he had been a cook and a cook's assistant on a ship feeding sailors. And so he knew how to make large dishes for large numbers of people. The one thing I didn't like about the other book was that it was too patriotic. The book kind of focused on José Andrés becoming an American citizen. And, you know, I just felt that that was not what he was about. I think that what is most amazing about José Andrés is that he, as happened in 2010, he's sitting watching a television where Haiti, Port-au-Prince, was completely destroyed by earthquakes. And he says to his wife and his two daughters, I can't sit here and watch this. I have to do something. So he calls up a couple of friends and then goes to Haiti, and he starts cooking for people without homes, without food to eat. And one thing he realizes very quickly is that as he's making his frijoles, which are not called frijoles in Spain, they're called something else, I don't know, gandules, or the Haitian women are looking disapprovingly at the way he's cooking the beans, because they don't eat beans the way he eats them in Spain. They like it as they like them in Guatemala, pureed. And so they taught him how to puree the beans. So his whole life was like a whole series of lessons. And it's not that, you know, lessons in the school sense of the word, but, you know, he is a man who is, you know, very attuned to this world and very motivated to adjust what he's doing depending on where he is.
Yeah, very open, right, to something different. So what's the message? Because I found it interesting also that it was a kid's book, right?
Yes.
Kid's picture book. It's beautiful. The illustrations were just beautiful. Like it took me there. Like the restaurant you mentioned, even this one here when he's cooking and he's a sous chef, like it really just took you there. What message are you trying to get to these young readers with this?
Okay, Dora Maria, you know, the writer has nothing to do with the illustrations.
No, I know, but the word did.
But the illustrator is actually from the same town as José Andrés. So Marta Alvarez Miguens was offered, and she's done a number of books for Source Books, like Dinosaur Lady and Shark Lady. And when she got the text, she put her whole heart into the book because it's a world that she knows really well. So as the author, I benefit from the work that the publisher does in putting together a gorgeous book, and also an illustrator whose illustrations, you know, capture, you know, beautifully the magic of the kitchen.
Yeah.
And okay, so going back to your question, because your question was very specific. You know, I think all through the book and all through the story I tell, to repeat myself, he learns these non-school lessons. The lessons are to listen to other people, to be adaptable to different places. For example, when he went to the Bahamas, all the crops are destroyed. So he came up with these meals ready-made. apples, peanut butter, and jelly sandwiches because you have to feed people, but you can't transport stoves and big pots when there's nothing to cook. When he went to Ukraine, he converted the people. He arrived 7 days after Russia invaded Ukraine, and he converted the people into food fighters. That's the term that he used. And basically, they're people who, and they were mostly teenagers and women because the men were fighting, and some women were fighting as well. And he got them to be part of the struggle. And his ability to inspire others to become part of that struggle, I think, is really important. So at the end of the book, there's a kind of a career day. And that career day is really the opportunity for the kids to think about what they could do in the world to possibly make the world better. And, you know, you can be an engineer, you can be a sanitation worker, you can be a mechanic, you can be Amelia Earhart, whatever it is that you're doing, you know, you need to be conscious of the fact that you can make this world a little bit better. And, you know, especially since we're about to live through some very dark times with Donald Trump and his henchmen and henchwomen, I think the message is very clear.
Okay, and I did want to ask, going through the story and just writing it out, how has this impacted you?
Well, you know, in all the novels and many of the short stories that I've written and many of the novels that I've translated, I've noticed that there's a thread, and that thread is usually one of transformation. So I'm, you know, I've written novels with hideous protagonists, but what saves them is the transformation they go through, helped along by various agents. Sometimes it's a parent, sometimes it's a friend, sometimes it's a lover, or a wife, or just, you know, an experience that shocks the character. And so what I saw in this story was that there was actually a straight line, a very, very straight line, and that even when there's a straight line, we may not always see it. And José Andrés saw it, and he was like a sponge. He took lessons and awarenesses from other people, and he applied them to create this World Central Kitchen, which is in Gaza. It's in Valencia, where they had terrible floods, and he's still that person.
Awesome. So one last question. Are you looking to translate these books to like Creole for the Haitians, Ukrainian for the Ukraine kids?
Well,
is there a plan for that?
The publisher is the one that will make that decision. I translated it into Spanish for Castillo, and I translated it also into a different Spanish for Spain. And one title is called José Alimenta el Mundo, and the other one is called José Cocinero del Mundo. And it sort of adapts to different countries. Yeah, I would like to have the book translated into other languages. One thing to note is that both the publisher in Spain and the publisher in the United States is donating whatever profits they have to the World Central Kitchen for the first print run.
I know, that's why I asked. It's a beautiful story. It's a homage to Jose's journey, but then also it's going into also donating to a great cause. So thank you for bringing that to life with your words and your craft. And thank you for joining us here with Las Comadres to get a little bit in-depth story behind the scenes of how this book came about. So with that, back to you, Karen.
Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Authors and interviewers, y'all were outstanding. If you haven't bought these books, get to it, because you got a lot of reading to do, comadres, compadres, and friends. Really, our thanks to you authors and to your publishers, Pantheon Books, Mariner Books, and Duopress, for their generous donation of books to our early registrants. Thank you, of course, to Comadre Julia Abrantes, Maria Ferrer, Dora Maria Abreu, and actually, Dave, those women also helped with the Writers' Conference. We were a team. From the very beginning, we have been a team supporting Latino authors. We want to thank our audience for taking the time to join us tonight. And to those that submitted questions, we'd like to thank all the volunteers without whom this book club would not happen. Thank you so much, volunteers. And please remember to support our authors by writing a review of their books on sites like Amazon, Goodreads, Barnes & Noble, etc. We have examples of how to do these in case you're a little uncomfortable with how to do it on our Latino Lit website. Just go over there and look at some examples we have and write some reviews. Those reviews carry weight with the publishers as well as with other readers. And buy books to support our authors. And if your library doesn't have a book you want, ask them to order it. And please attend your virtual local book club meetings and bring a friend or two. And remember, our book club is open to men and women, Latinos and non-Latinos. All are welcome. Our January 2025 books are The Prince and the Coyote by David Bowles and Embodied Joy by Beatriz Fitzler. Again, thank you all for your continued support of our book club in Latino literature. And please join us in celebrating Las Comadres and Friends National Latino Book Club throughout the year by buying these books and supporting the Latino authors. Good night to all. Felices fiestas, and always read Latino Lit.